communication and its models today. So first, I want you guys to imagine something with me. Imagine a world without communication. You don't see anything? Right, because there wouldn't be one. Communication is the most important aspect of our lives, that humans have in their lives. Because without it, businesses wouldn't be able to run, heck, even smaller. We wouldn't be able to carry out our day-to-day activities. We wouldn't be able to buy anything. There would be nothing. We would be walking around aimlessly, not knowing what to do, not knowing anyone, and we'd be useless. And that's why I think it's the most important aspect of life, or aspect that humans have in life. It's the best tool. And I'm not alone on that. Scientists, obviously, they thought that it was important also. They thought it was important enough to actually study it and observe it. And while studying and observing, they came up with 3 models of communication that they thought would help explain kind of how it goes and how we do it. So there's 3 models. One model is called transmission, then there's interaction, and then there's transaction. So transmission is the model that describes communication as a one-way linear process in which a sender encodes a message and transmits it through a channel to a receiver who decodes it. So that's basically the sender. It's a one-way street. So the sender is the only one that can send a message. The sender and the receiver don't switch like roles or anything. It's just the sender sending a message and the receiver receiving it, decoding it, and using it. You could say that's kind of like in the business world when your boss tells you to do something. You don't say anything back to him. He just tells you what to do. You receive it and you decode it and go do it. And that's that. So next one is the interaction model of communication. This describes communication as a two-way process in which participants alternate positions as sender and receiver and generate meaning by sending and receiving feedback within physical and psychological context. So basically, this one's a little bit more complex. The sender and receiver switch positions, but not in the way that you think. The sender and receiver don't send messages to each other, they just send feedback that create meaning. So first the sender sends a message to the receiver, then the receiver will send feedback back to the sender, and then vice versa. It's like a big circle. The last one is called transactional model of communication. This model describes the exchange of messages between sender and receiver, where each take turns sending and receiving messages. So this basically means this is like your everyday communication where, hey, say you're talking to your friend and you send him a message talking, you say something to him and he says something back to you. A completely separate, not feedback, but a completely separate message that he sends back to you and you send to him. And it's like a big circle. So in my opinion, these are a little confusing, a little too scientific for me. I can't talk. So I've come up with a new model to kind of help explain the transmission, which is the one that I think is the most confusing. It might be the simplest, but in my opinion, I don't really like how they explain it. So I'm actually going to use an analogy, and it's called the catcher-to-pitcher communication model. So basically what this means is I played baseball my whole life, and from playing baseball my whole life, I've obviously gained experience, and what I've found is that the catcher-to-pitcher communication is what runs the game. It's the most important communication, like airway on the field. Without it, the catcher wouldn't know what the pitcher's throwing, and the pitcher wouldn't know what to throw to the catcher, therefore losing the game because you're unorganized and you don't know what you're doing. So this is like I said, this is a transmission style of communication. It's just the catcher sending a message to the pitcher, which in this case is these signs. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4, and each number means a different pitch for the pitcher to throw. So say the catcher puts up the sign. This is nonverbal communication, by the way. The catcher gives the sign of, say, a 1. The pitcher receives the message, but if you can see, he doesn't send it back. He doesn't send any feedback. He doesn't send any message. He just takes in the information and uses it. This is how the pitcher knows what to throw, because on the field, the catcher knows the most about the game. He knows what to throw or what the pitcher should throw, where. He knows the batters. He knows everything. So generally, the pitcher doesn't question what the catcher says, which is why the pitcher doesn't send any feedback or any other messages to him. So it's a very linear style of communication. There's no talking. It's very simple, but it's effective. And that's how teams win games, because of the communication between the pitcher and the catcher. I could give you a real world example. I said it earlier, in the business world, when your boss tells you to do something, you don't say anything back to him. It's just a one-way linear message that goes from him to you. And if he's telling you something to do, you go do it. There's no talk back, there's no nothing, you just do it. And that's my model of communication.